HOA president abused her power for years. I made sure she went to prison. I wasn't just fined for having my trash cans out too early. No, Karen, the self-declared queen of the HOA, decided my trash cans were a personal attack on the neighborhood's aesthetic values. That was my introduction to Oak Ridge Estates, a suburban slice of paradise where lawns were manicured hedges, trimmed with military precision, and everyone waved politely until Karen noticed you. It started small, $50 fine for leaving the trash cans out at 6:45 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. 7 for inappropriate holiday decorations. 1 for a lawn gnome she claimed was un-American. Yes, a lawn gnome. At first I thought this was just suburban politics. Annoying, sure, but manageable. Then came the letter. Dear Mr. Patterson, your property continues to violate HOA standards. If these violations persist, further action, including potential foreclosure, may be considered. Sincerely, Karen Whitlock, HOA president, over a lawn gnome. By the third month, my mailbox was a shrine to passive-aggressive fines. I tried to reason with her. Everyone does. At first, Karen would flash that tight, saccharine smile and say, rules are rules, we must preserve property values. But here's the thing about Karen. She didn't enforce the rules equally. Her friends could park RVs on their lawns, leave Halloween decorations up until Easter, and blast country music until midnight. But if you weren't in her circle, your life became a paperwork nightmare. I wasn't the only victim. Mrs. Thompson, 2 doors down, was fined $250 because her grandson's tricycle was unsightly debris. A veteran named Carl got slapped with $500 in fines for flying a slightly faded American flag. When Carl protested, Karen muttered he was bad for the neighborhood's image. By now, Karen had ruled the HOA for 8 years. She manipulated the board elections by stacking proxy votes, mostly from elderly residents who were too tired or intimidated to attend meetings. Her reign was ironclad, her word law. I could have moved, many had, but this was my home. My late wife and I had chosen this place to retire in peace. I wasn't going to let a petty dictator drive me out, so I stopped playing by Karen's rules. I started attending every HOA meeting. Not just attending recording, I researched HOA bylaws. I learned about selective enforcement doctrine, fair housing violations, and how abuse of power could lead to civil liability. I wasn't just a retired high school teacher anymore. I was about to become Karen's worst nightmare. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the neighborhood basked in suburban quiet, Karen strutted up my driveway. In her hand, yet another fine $500, this time for excessive shrubbery. Mr. Patterson, she began, this is your final warning. I took the paper, smiled politely, and said, Karen, this won't go the way you think, she sneered. We'll see about that. Oh, we would. Because what Karen didn't know was that her empire of fines was built on sand, and the tide was coming in to be continued. After that ridiculous $500 fine for excessive shrubbery, I knew I wasn't just dealing with an overzealous HOA president, I was dealing with a tyrant in khakis and pearls. At first, I tried the polite route, what folks around here call Midwest nice. I trimmed the shrubs, I repainted the fence, I even removed the poor lawn gnome who frankly had never offended anyone in his tiny ceramic life. Did it help? Of course not. 2 weeks later, $200 fine for unauthorized plant species. Apparently, my wife's beloved hydrangeas weren't on Karen's approved floor list. Then came the $300 fine for my American flag being improperly illuminated at night. For the record, the flag had a perfectly good solar spotlight. Karen just didn't like the angle. By month 6, I had racked up $2,450 in fines, and I wasn't alone. Carl, the Vietnam vet 2 doors down, was fined $500 for a slightly cracked driveway. The McNeil's young couple across the street got slapped with $600 in penalties for leaving their stroller on the front porch. Even sweet old Mrs. Thompson, who could barely walk, received a $150 fine because her grandson's sidewalk chalk defaced community property. Karen wasn't enforcing rules, she was weaponizing them. At the next HOA meeting, I raised my hand calmly. Madam President, I said, can we review the process for approving landscaping changes? Karen smiled that tight, sugary smile. Of course, Mr. Patterson, but you must submit your request 60 days in advance and include a professional landscaping report. 60 days for flowers. Another neighbor stood up. Karen, the fines are getting out of control. Shouldn't the community vote on increases? Karen's smile didn't waver. According to Article 14, Section C, the board may adjust fines without a full vote if deemed necessary for maintaining neighborhood standards. Karen decided, Karen enforced, Karen profited. Now you might be wondering, how did she stay in power for so long? Good question. Here's how Karen gamed the system: stacked proxy votes. Every annual election, Karen gathered proxy votes from elderly or absentee homeowners. She promised to vote in their best interest. Conveniently, that interest always meant re-electing Karen and her inner circle. Rule manipulation. The HOA bylaws were written in legal spaghetti. Only a corporate attorney could untangle. Karen used the vague language to justify just about any action she pleased. Intimidation. Homeowners who fought back got flooded with violation notices, legal threats, or mysteriously delayed maintenance requests. In 8 years, Karen had turned Oak Ridge Estates into her personal fiefdom. But here's where things took an interesting turn. One night while walking my dog, Scout, I noticed something odd. Karen's backyard was undergoing major renovations. New patio, outdoor kitchen, even a fancy koi pond. Funny. The HOA financial reports, those heavily redacted packets Karen handed out quarterly, showed no major expenditures. And Karen didn't have a known job. Her husband Frank had passed away 2 years prior. So where was the money coming from? That's when I had an idea. I called an old friend, Mike, who happened to be a retired CPA. We went through the HOA's financial summaries. What we found: a rabbit hole deeper than Karen's koi pond, suspicious patterns, landscaping expenses that didn't match any visible work, legal fees paid to firms no one had heard of, community improvements with no corresponding permits, and worst of all, missing funds totaling over $75,000 in just the last 2 years. It wasn't proof of embezzlement yet, but it smelled like a month-old tuna sandwich left in the sun. I knew confronting Karen directly would only make things worse. She'd either cover her tracks or retaliate harder. So instead, I played along. I paid my next fine, smiled at HOA meetings, pretended to see the error of my ways. Meanwhile, Mike and I built a dossier thicker than the Oak Ridge HOA bylaws. Then, as if the universe wanted to help, Karen got sloppy. At the next HOA board meeting, she proposed a 15% increase in dues. Her reasoning: necessary for upcoming repairs and community enhancements. When asked what those enhancements were, she listed new clubhouse furniture, security cameras, miscellaneous beautification. I almost burst out laughing. There was no clubhouse, no approved security contract, and beautification. Apparently it meant koi ponds and outdoor kitchens in Karen's backyard. The room was tense. Even Karen's usual supporters, the ones who loved her bake sales and block parties, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mrs. Thompson whispered, "This doesn't feel right." I leaned over and replied, "That's because it isn't." At that moment, I knew the tide was turning. Karen had grown too confident, too greedy. Her empire built on fines and fear was starting to crumble, and soon it would collapse entirely. If you think this was wild, wait till you hear what Karen did next. I knew Karen would retaliate. That was her nature. She didn't just punish rule breakers. She crushed dissenters. And now I wasn't just dissenting, I was digging into her secrets. The first strike came faster than I expected. One rainy Thursday morning, I stepped out to find a shiny new metal gate barring my driveway. A sign hung from it: temporary access restricted, HOA property enhancement project. Funny, the HOA had never mentioned an enhancement project at the last meeting, and according to city records, which I checked within an hour, no permits had been filed for work on my property line. I called the HOA office. A board assistant who sounded suspiciously like Karen's niece said, "Mr. Patterson, this is necessary to comply with updated community guidelines. We appreciate your cooperation." Cooperation. They had locked me out of my own home. The next morning, I found 3 violation notices taped to the gate, trash bins visible from the street, improper lawn maintenance, unauthorized exterior fixtures, the gate which they installed. The fines totaled $1 and $200. That's right, Karen fined me for a gate she had put up. If there was ever a Guinness World Record for audacity, she'd win by a mile. Word spread quickly. Some neighbors expressed quiet sympathy. "We're so sorry, Mr. Patterson. Stay strong." But others, Karen loyalists, began parroting her narrative: rules are rules. We can't have one person thinking they're above the community. Sound familiar? That's how dictatorships survive: fear. And a few willing collaborators. Just when I thought Karen couldn't sink lower, she pulled her dirtiest move yet. One sweltering afternoon, I returned from the grocery store to find my house without power. Not a flicker. No AC, no refrigerator. A notice from the HOA was taped to my front door. Due to ongoing violations and unpaid fines, HOA has requested a temporary suspension of utility services pending compliance. Illegal, outrageous, cruel utilities are regulated by the city, and HOA has no authority to suspend them. But Karen was banking on fear and confusion. Most homeowners wouldn't know their rights. Most would cave. She didn't realize I wasn't most homeowners. At the next HOA meeting, I tried to appeal to the board. Legally, they had to allow me to present my case. Madam President, distinguished board members, this action violates both municipal code and HOA bylaws. Karen cut me off. Mr. Patterson, this is not a courtroom. The board has reviewed your behavior and determined you are non-compliant. Fines will stand until full payment is received. The board members nodded like bobbleheads. Of course they did. Karen had handpicked them or coerced their votes through proxies. I wasn't facing a fair tribunal. I was facing a kangaroo court. That night, I sat alone in my dark house, flashlight in hand, fuming. I thought of my wife, how proud she'd be of me, standing up, how furious she'd be at Karen's cruelty. I glanced at the growing stack of violation notices, at the HOA financial reports riddled with inconsistencies. Then at the thick dossier Mike and I had built fraud embezzlement. Selective enforcement. We had the evidence, but now we needed the right moment and the right allies. Turns out Karen's overreach had finally woken more than just me. Carl, the Vietnam vet, knocked on my door. Patterson, I'm with you. She fined me again for the flag. Enough is enough. Mrs. Thompson joined us. She threatened to tow my grandson's car. We can't keep living like this. Even the McNeils, once too scared to speak, stepped up. Soon a quiet resistance formed. We called ourselves the Garden Committee. After all, most of our so-called violations involved our gardens. Then came the twist Karen never saw coming. One night, a woman named Laura Rivera approached me after a neighborhood watch meeting. Mr. Patterson, I'm an attorney, real estate and HOA law. My mother lives here and Karen's fined her nearly into bankruptcy. She held up a binder. I've been documenting Karen's misconduct for years. I think we can build a class action lawsuit. Sensing the tide turning, Karen made her boldest and dumbest move yet. I received a notice of lien and foreclosure intent. Karen claimed that my unpaid fines now exceeded $10,000, justifying the HOA placing a lien on my property and initiating foreclosure proceedings. Let me be clear. An HOA can place a lien for unpaid dues or fines, but only when done according to strict state regulations and proper legal procedures. Karen's notice was riddled with errors. Procedural violations, incorrect fine totals, no proper hearing notice. It was legally speaking a dumpster fire, but to the average homeowner, it would have been terrifying. That was her strategy. Fear over facts. With Laura Rivera's help, we drafted a cease and desist letter citing multiple fair housing violations, breach of fiduciary duty, and potential criminal liability. We sent copies to the HOA Board, City Code Enforcement, the State HOA Oversight Committee, and Karen herself. Karen didn't respond in writing. Instead, she showed up at my door with 2 HOA board members in tow, holding yet another violation notice. You've brought this on yourself, Patterson, she hissed. You think you can scare me with paperwork? I've run this neighborhood for almost a decade. I smiled. Not paperwork, Karen, evidence. I pointed to the small crowd gathering on the sidewalk, neighbors' cell phones recording Carl, the McNeils, Mrs. Thompson, even some of Karen's former loyalists. For the first time, Karen looked rattled. The court of public opinion was turning against her. That night, Laura filed an official complaint with the state. By morning, the city inspector had posted a notice on Karen's gate. Pending investigation, suspension of HOA enforcement authority. Karen's power frozen. Her empire of fines cracked, and soon it would collapse entirely. If you think that was bold, wait till you hear how we expose Karen's crimes to the whole town. By the time the city inspector froze Karen's enforcement power, her once fearsome reputation was already eroding. But freezing wasn't enough. We weren't here to give her a timeout. We were here to end her reign. Our newly formed garden committee gathered in Carl's garage, and inside were Carl, the Vietnam vet with a flag and a grudge, Mrs. Thompson, the sweet grandmother, with a sharp legal mind from her days as a paralegal, the McNeils, tech-savvy millennials compiling video evidence from security cameras, Laura Rivera, our secret weapon, a seasoned attorney who'd tangled with far worse than Karen. I spread the HOA financial reports and violation records across an old workbench. It's time, Laura said, flipping open a thick binder. We filed a lawsuit, and not just civil. We push for criminal investigation. Won't that take forever? Mrs. Thompson asked. Yes, which is why we also go public. Laura smiled. Sunlight, my friends, is the best disinfectant. We organized a special community meeting. Not an HOA board meeting, but an all-homeowners assembly, which under state law could be called if 25% of members petitioned for it. We gathered 42 signatures overnight. Karen tried to dismiss the meeting as unauthorized, but legally she couldn't stop it. The day arrived. The venue, the community park Karen loved to parade through during her garden contests. I stood at the front with Laura and the garden committee. Dozens of homeowners filled the seats. Some stood in the back. A few former Karen supporters lingered nervously at the edges. Karen herself arrived late, sunglasses on, arms crossed. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "We're here not to discuss fines or bylaws, but something much bigger, the integrity of our community." Laura stepped forward. "Over the past year, we've documented serious concerns regarding financial mismanagement, selective enforcement, and potential criminal activity within the HOA leadership." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Laura handed out printed summaries, bullet points, not legal jargon. $75,000 unaccounted for fines disproportionately applied to non-supporters. Personal expenses paid from HOA funds. Abuse of proxy voting to maintain power. Attempted illegal foreclosure proceedings. Karen laughed bitterly. "This is a smear campaign. None of this proves criminal intent." "You're right," Laura replied smoothly. "That's why we've submitted the full report to the county district attorney's office." A collective gasp. An investigator has already begun reviewing the evidence. Karen's smirk faltered. One by one, neighbors stood up. Carl described the intimidation tactics he'd faced. Mrs. Thompson revealed that Karen had threatened to revoke her parking permit if she didn't stop siding with troublemakers. The McNeils presented time-stamped videos showing Karen and board members entering HOA storage units and removing items later seen in Karen's yard sales. Even two former board members once loyal to Karen spoke out. "She made us approve fake expenses," one said, "or face losing our positions and getting fined ourselves." The crowd murmured louder, anger replacing fear. "This is ridiculous." Karen snapped, her face red. "You people think you can just take over. I built this community. I protected your property values." "By stealing from us," someone shouted. "By terrorizing elderly homeowners," another added. "By nearly bankrupting my mother." Laura's voice cut through like a knife. Karen tried to regain control. "As HOA president, I still have the authority." "No, you don't," I interrupted. "Your authority was suspended pending investigation." At that moment, two county deputies appeared at the park entrance. "Karen Whitlock," one called out. She froze. "You are being served notice of a pending criminal investigation. Please come with us." The crowd parted as the deputies approached. "This is harassment," Karen shrieked. "You can't arrest me. I'm the president." "Ma'am, you're not under arrest at this moment, but we strongly advise you to comply." Karen's voice cracked. "You'll regret this, all of you." As she was escorted away, phones captured every second. By sunset, the video was already circulating on Facebook and the local news station's website. HOA president under criminal investigation for fraud and misconduct. The Queen had fallen, and the kingdom cheered. The following weeks were a whirlwind. A forensic audit confirmed over $93,000 in misappropriated funds. Karen was officially charged with embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of fiduciary duty. The county seized her property to recover damages. The HOA board was dissolved. A new interim committee elected fairly by the community took over Karen's few remaining supporters, silent or apologetic. One morning, Carl, Mrs. Thompson, the McNeils, and I gathered in the freshly reopened community garden. "We did it," Mrs. Thompson whispered. "No," I corrected. "We stood up. That's what matters." Laura joined us, handing me a copy of the court's judgment. "By the way," she said with a grin, "Karen took a plea deal, 6 years, no parole." The garden burst into quiet applause. Justice wasn't fast, but it was relentless. If you think Karen's fall was dramatic, wait till you hear how we rebuilt the neighborhood stronger than ever. The day Karen was sentenced felt surreal. Not triumphant, not joyous. Just right. 6 years. No parole, court-mandated restitution. It wasn't revenge, it was accountability. And after nearly a decade under Karen's thumb, that accountability meant everything to Oak Ridge Estates. The first order of business, rebuilding the HOA. No more secretive meetings. No more proxy vote manipulation. No more fear. With Laura Rivera's guidance, the community elected a temporary ethics committee. Its job oversee the selection of an entirely new board, homeowners with no ties to Karen's regime. Every candidate was required to disclose conflicts of interest, commit to transparent finances, pledge term limits. We also voted to hire an independent property management firm to handle day-to-day operations. No more unchecked power. Thanks to the forensic audit, nearly $75,000 was recovered from Karen's seized assets. It didn't cover everything she stole, but it was enough to refund some of the most outrageous fines, restore the community garden which Karen had tried to repurpose into a private event space, upgrade lighting and security around the neighborhood. For the first time in years, residents felt hope instead of fear. The changes weren't just administrative. Carl raised a new properly illuminated flag. The McNeil's toddler rode his tricycle freely on the sidewalk. Mrs. Thompson's grandson covered the pavement in colorful chalk drawings without a single complaint. And me, I replanted the hydrangeas. Karen once deemed unauthorized. They thrived. Our new HOA meetings became less like courtrooms and more like neighborhood cookouts. People actually smiled. They debated respectfully. Disagreements happened, sure, but no one feared retaliation. Funny, Carl said during one meeting, how freedom tastes like barbecue and lemonade. Better than fines and fear, Mrs. Thompson added. We all laughed. Karen's name faded from official records. Her reign became a cautionary tale whispered to new homeowners. We had a Karen once, we won't have another. Some former loyalists even apologized. We were scared. They admitted she convinced us that speaking up would cost us everything. It almost did, I replied. But silence costs more. One sunny Saturday, the community gathered in the park, the same one where Karen's downfall had begun. We planted a memorial tree. Not for Karen, but for the spirit of community she tried to destroy. A plaque at the base read, Oak Ridge Estates, a place where neighbors stand together. As I stood there watching families chat and kids play, I thought of my late wife. You'd be proud, I whispered. We didn't just save a neighborhood, we reclaimed it. Justice hadn't been easy. It hadn't been fast, but it had arrived and it had stayed. If you thought Karen's fall was dramatic, wait till you hear how Oak Ridge Estates became a model for HOA reform across the county. Looking back, what happened at Oak Ridge Estates wasn't just a battle over lawns, fences, or even money. It was a battle over power. The power to intimidate, the power to silence, the power to turn neighbors into enemies. But here's the truth Karen and others like her never understand. No HOA president is above the community. Rules exist to protect, not to punish, and when homeowners stand together, even the strongest tyrant falls. Key lessons for every HOA and homeowner. Stay informed. Don't just pay your dues and ignore the fine print. Learn your HOA's bylaws. Know your rights. Ignorance is how power-hungry leaders thrive. Don't stay silent. When something feels unfair, speak up. Chances are, others feel the same. Fear isolates, but unity empowers demand. Transparency. Every HOA should provide clear, timely financial reports. No redactions, no vague expenses. If they won't, that's a red flag. Know the law. Selective enforcement, harassment, and financial misconduct aren't just unethical, they're illegal. And there are legal experts and advocacy groups ready to help. Community is stronger than control. The purpose of an HOA is to maintain shared spaces and protect property values, not to control lives. A healthy HOA serves its members, not itself. Karen thought she could rule by fear forever. She was wrong. In the end, good neighbors armed with courage, knowledge, and a little humor reclaim their community. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever faced an unfair HOA? Have you seen a Karen try to take over your neighborhood? Share your story in the comments below. Let's make this a space where homeowners can learn, laugh, and most importantly, stand together. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next tale of HOA justice served.